we're seeing a sort of a long-term shift of consumer behavior from how they search for products traditionally, which would be use a search engine like Google or Amazon to find something, to more of a conversational approach. And I think we're seeing it now very heavily in fashion, but it's shifting to other categories as well, where people will go to ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and be like, I have an event tomorrow. I need or next week, I need like black tie, I need something to wear. And these LLMs will then recommend products. So it's not an immediate shift that's happening right now, but it's something that you can kind of see developing over the next year or so, where just search behavior changes. And getting in now essentially allows you to hedge against it and be one of the first ones and build authority to then, when this shift happens, be there at the top and top of mind.
You're listening to Customer Growth Sessions, presented by Intergrowth, where we talk through strategies to help up-and-coming e-commerce businesses bring in more customers. I'm your host, Pat Ahern. Let's jump in. All right, listeners, welcome back to the latest episode of Customer Growth Sessions. Today, I'm thrilled to have on James Kirkby from Kirkby Consulting. He's the founder over there and is doing some incredible stuff with AI and large language models. James, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be on.
Happy to have you on. You have a very interesting background. Can we start out talking a little about what you did before Kirkby Consulting?
Yeah, for sure. So I've been in the Shopify ecosystem for about 10 years now. So in college, basically, I started my own Shopify stores. Nothing to write home about. So it was always like drop shipping and like fidget spinners and all that kind of stuff. But that eventually turned into an agency gig. So people I met started asking me if I could design the sites because I was good at that. I was not very good at the actual running an e-com business part, but that turned into an agency gig. And I've been in the Shopify space for over 10 years now.
Amazing, amazing. And talk to us about Kirkby Consulting. What are you guys doing over there?
For sure. So essentially, we're a Shopify development shop. So people come to us if they have custom feature needs, if they want to upgrade their theme, if they just have a roadmap of features that they want to implement, and we act as their like external growth agency essentially. And on top of that, like you said, we've been doing a lot of AI work in recent weeks and months. So what we started doing is helping people set up the backend structure really to rank in AI chatbots.
Brilliant, brilliant. And with that, I would imagine a lot of the discussion today is going to get into, I still don't feel like there's a great term for it yet, but I would broadly say information discovery and brand recognition with AI is maybe like a vague enough term that we can work with.
Yeah.
Let's start out with why invest in this space. You know, if I'm running an e-com shop right now, why should I be thinking about showing up in large language models?
I think we're seeing a sort of a long-term shift of consumer behavior from how they search for products traditionally, which would be I use a search engine like Google or Amazon to find something, to more of a conversational approach. And I think we're seeing it now very heavily in fashion, but it's shifting to other categories as well, where people will go to ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and be like, I have an event tomorrow. I need or next week, I need like black tie, I need something to wear. And these LLMs will then recommend products, right? So it's not an immediate shift that's happening right now, but it's something that you can kind of see developing over the next year or so, where just search behavior changes. Getting in now essentially allows you to hedge against it and be one of the first ones and build authority to then, when this shift happens, be there at the top and top of mind.
And I love the way you put it, that it's this, I perceived it as one, it's this hedge for the market changing. Two, it's this incredible long-term opportunity to look into, which I think with a lot of LLM related discussions that I've heard, oftentimes there's a misconception that the entire market has shifted to using various AI tools as their way of discovering info. You know, Google at the moment still has a pretty substantial lead over any LLM, but I really like that positioning of, hey, this is a phenomenal long-term opportunity. Start thinking about this now, because this is how a lot of your customers are going to be finding you in the future.
Yeah, exactly. I think as with any new topic, like there's a lot of people out there that have changed their business model completely to, you need to be an AI now, and here's my $10,000 coaching for it, right? But like with every new trend, like there's a serious aspect underneath it and it's more of a long-term shift, and that's what you should be focusing on. I wouldn't get all panicky if you're not doing this right now, but it's something that's definitely an opportunity. It's like SEO, right? It's an opportunity that you should take advantage of, but you're fine doing it in a structured way and thinking long term versus kind of jumping on it now, all panicky and dropping everything else.
Absolutely. And with that, let's say, or maybe one question I want to start out with, in your eyes, should every e-commerce business be doing this now, or is this an opportunity to look into after, opportunities 1, 2, and 3 that you see as being more front of mind at the moment for e-commerce?
I think it depends on what type of e-com product or what type of products are selling, and then also the type of e-commerce business you're running. So, and then also what stage you're at, frankly, right? So if you're just starting an e-commerce brand, should you do this as the first thing? No, because it's not going to have an immediate effect, right? And you're not going to make any money to sustain your e-commerce business. I'd say it's if you have good paid marketing, you have a good retention engine, like your e-commerce business is working and fundamentally profitable, but you're looking to expand to new audiences, or you're seeing your SEO efforts kind of decline in effectiveness, then I think that's a great next opportunity to jump on. Like I said earlier, I wouldn't drop everything now to go do it. And then it also depends a little bit on the types of products you're selling. So if you're like, let's say you're in a space where you don't need a lot of explanation for the product, right? Then an LLM is probably not going to be your best approach, because usually people will use them if they need a lot of like recommendation. They'll use the LLM as like a essentially a sales rep that does not work for you, like an independent consultant. So if you're selling like, let's say, supplements, or you're selling fashion, something like that, then I think it makes a lot of sense because people are going to ask a lot of follow-up questions that then hopefully the LLM can answer for you.
Brilliant. Brilliant. So let's get a little bit into the weeds with, let's say for the listeners that fall into those realms, they have a good retention program set up, they have a good paid marketing strategy to acquire customers short term. They say, okay, James, we're sold. We're focusing on LLMs next. What are some of the big levers that we should be pulling to maximize our rankings and maximize the number of citations that we have, let's say, in large language models?
Yeah, there's two approaches essentially, and they're very similar to what you would do in SEO as well. So that's the other benefit, right? A lot of this stuff also impacts your SEO rankings in traditional search engines. So essentially, AI is very focused on, can I provide a source for this? Because at the beginning, the hallucination was a big issue. So they're always trying to find sources for this. And you have essentially two ways of giving it more information. So number one is structured data on your website. So if you operate a Shopify site, by default, Shopify will give you some structured data around your products. Structured data just means machine readable for an LLM, essentially. It will tell it what the product is called, what the description is, what the price is, shipping times, maybe stuff like that. But there's always structured data you can add that's specific to your product category. So if you're selling, let's say, furniture, for example, there'll be a ton of structured data you can add that tells people what the color is, what the fabric is, all that kind of stuff. So go fill that out, because then if people ask an LLM, it will find that machine readable on your website and be able to answer questions about it. And then the second thing is review platforms, essentially, or PR mentions, right? So comparison sites, Trustpilot, Proven Expert, all those kind of things. LLMs, like search engines, regard those as higher authority than your own website because it's an independently verified site, essentially. So those two things are the biggest levels at the moment.
What I'm hearing there is, first add a bunch of schema markup to your website. Schema is obviously it's very technical in nature. So I'm curious if you have a good tool you would recommend that helps with building out schema for someone maybe who's less technical in nature, who can then say, hey, developer that I work with, here's this big, bucket of schema markup. Can you add this to the appropriate section on my website?
Definitely. So the way we usually do it on this is Shopify specific though. So what we usually do is we implement it as snippets on the product pages, and then we do one snippet per category, because a lot of the time the schema markup will be the same across the same category of products, right? And then you just have to go in and edit the details. There are some apps out there, but I can't in good conscience recommend any of them because they upcharge you a ton of money to essentially just implement schema markup. There's some very good YouTube tutorials actually that teach you how to do it yourself if you're non-technical. And then Google has obviously the rich snippets results page where you can then see if it's showing. So even if you're non-technical, I think you could figure it out in like an afternoon or two on how to do it. And then if you have a developer, obviously they can do it for you.
You started an e-commerce business because you had a great product, not because you wanted to become a full-time marketer. But here you are, spending a few hours every week trying to figure out Facebook ads, SEO, content marketing, instead of doing the things that are actually going to build the business. At Intergrowth, we take customer acquisition off your plate entirely. No more managing meta ads, no more running SEO. We handle all of the customer acquisition for you, so you can get back to doing the things that actually move the business forward. If you're ready to stop being your own marketing department, go to intergrowth.com/CGS to book a strategy session with our team. Once again, that's intergrowth.com/CGS. And one tool I'll throw out there as well, because, as you said, this goes directly into the realm of SEO. So schema is a big thing that we spend time on. One tool that I find really helpful is if you identify, let's say, like 3 or even 2 big name competitors in your space, go to validator.schema.org, I believe is the URL. I'll add it into the show notes. Plug these competitor sites. I would say start with their homepage and then go to like one of their product pages, their PDPs afterwards. Plug these into validator.schema.org and look to see what is the schema that these really big competitors are using. If they're a brand 100x your size, they're probably putting the time into schema. So that can be a really good reference point. And James, to your point, schema is technical, but you can find great YouTube tutorials if you want to do it on your own. But from there, you can at least get a sense of what are the maybe schema items that I should be prioritizing for my site.
Yeah, that's a good point. Schema, obviously, schema.org has all of the schema that you could add, like the stuff that you can add. And it's so expansive and it's kind of hard to find your product category sometimes. So, yeah, definitely looking at competitors makes a lot of sense.
Let's talk about some of the external review sites. You mentioned Trustpilot in the mix. What I'm perceiving is good investment to sign up for Trustpilot, some of these other big review platforms. And then from there, get a handful of customers to leave a review on these different platforms.
Correct. Yeah. So I'd always go, if you're going with review platforms, I'd probably start with the reviews app that you have installed on your own website, because a lot of the time they'll actually have an independent website with the reviews. So think of the common ones like Yotpo, for example. Even Trustpilot has something like that now. They have stuff that you can put on your Shopify website, but then they'll also have a reviews page about your brand posted on their website. So the first thing I do is I check, does your review have something like that? And if not, then like you said, start directing people towards Trustpilot, Proven Expert, anything like that, Trusted Shops, depending on where you are.
Brilliant. And the third grouping you talked about is, and I forget the exact term that you used for it, but what I would describe as like digital PR. You may have said like citation-based content, but regardless, talk to us about that. How can we go about getting cited in some of these big name publications and just broadly other sources that LLMs are looking into?
Definitely. So first thing I do is, again, if you're a brand and you've got some history, then most brands will have some kind of press mention, even from like back in, I don't know, whenever they launched, right? So they might have press mentions already. Just go resurface them. Make sure to link to them on your website so AI can find it when people are looking specifically for your brand. And then the other piece of it was, like I said, comparison sites. So a lot of the time these places will be affiliate sites anyways, right? So they'll just accept you as a product recommendation to make some money on. And at the moment, LLMs don't seem to distinguish between these affiliate sites and like bigger publications. They'll just look like, can I find this brand on an external website that's not the brand's website? So I'd start with affiliate sites, honestly, and just start signing up to a bunch of them just to get your name out there. And then you will start getting cited in LLMs.
Absolutely. I'm curious what your take is on I would call it like the blogging strategy, whereby, and I'll come up with a tangible example. I talk about razor blades. I feel like it's like my go-to product recommendation on the podcast a lot. So if I'm running a razor blade company, there are probably a dozen different razor blade companies that have written a long form blog article that is the X best razor blades of 2026. And my razor blade company is going to be number one on the list with a really detailed explanation of why we're best. And then it's going to be all the other razor blade companies on there. At the moment, these rank extremely well on Google. I hate the fact that they do, but it's a reality. They do. What is your take on this strategy?
So I'd actually modify it a little bit for LLMs, just because the fundamental difference between how a Google search and an LLM search works. There's follow-up conversation that happens on an LLM that doesn't happen with a Google search query, right? So people might Google what's the best razor blade for a drive shave in 2026, I don't know, right? And then you rank with a comparison article like that. With an LLM search, I can get a lot more detailed and ask follow-up questions. So what I do instead of these, like, what's the best razor blade in whatever, yeah, I do more long form content on like some more informational stuff. So, like, I don't know, which is the best shaving cream to use with my razor? How long is my razor going to stay sharp for? How do I resharpen them? Like, how do I save money? Shit, like those kind of things that could be follow up questions from ChatGPT queries or Claude queries, right? Because people are going to ask more detailed stuff, so you can give them more detailed answers, which will then surface in the LLM.
That's brilliant. The classic content marketing strategy that, really started out as coming from Google, and now, to your point, now it's having so much more opportunity in large language models.
It's even stuff like some people don't like buying from a D2C website, right? They want to go to a retailer. So if you're selling through retailers as well, just having a page of where can I buy this? Because the follow-up question was, so we have this one company that sells aphrodisiac chocolate in the UK that we did this for. And basically, if you search for what's the best aphrodisiac chocolate company in the UK, they will surface number one now in most queries. And then a lot of follow up questions we've seen is where can I buy this? And then you just implement a where to buy page, which then obviously surfaces your own content into that prompt, right?
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. And I think that's, for me, one of the most exciting opportunities with LLMs is I'm seeing this trend where there's so much opportunity to create all of this. Maybe I would call it like product marketing related content on your website. I think about that with shipping policies a lot as well. That if I go to, let's say I go to ChatGPT and I say, hey, I want to buy a razor blade and I need to make sure it arrives at my address in a week's time and I don't want to pay any money at all for shipping. What brand should I work with? If you're that razor blade company that meets all those criteria, but you don't list it on your website, you're still not going to be recommended.
Right.
I'm curious how you go about approaching and finding, these types of product related queries. Is there a, one size fits all search for these 10 prompts, or is it catered to every individual business?
So that I'd say there's some universal things like shipping is a good one. You just mentioned the refund policy, the return policy, stuff like that. That's all universal. And there as well, like make sure you have it as content on your website, but also add it as structured data because that's also stuff you can add to the product as structured data, right? Like what's the return policy? How long does shipping take? Like that kind of stuff. The second piece is a more personalized approach and depends on your category. So usually it's a good place to start in your customer service department and see what kind of stuff do people ask because they can't find it on our website. What have we had to put in our FAQ section? And any kind of question that is meaty enough, I'd go build a separate page for that essentially that ranks and then obviously make sure that the FAQs are also machine readable.
Hey, listeners, if you're struggling to profitably acquire new customers, we're here to help. Pat from Intergrowth here. We've been helping e-commerce brands like Brevity, Cierto Tequila, Bella Bridesmaids, and more since 2016 to profitably scale their customer base. If you're interested in learning more, go to intergrowth.com/CGS, and you can schedule a complimentary consultation with me. Once again, that's intergrowth.com/CGS. I would be very curious to hear your take on LLM text files, because I know there are a lot of people in the SEO community that love to bash on LLM text files that are not a fan of them. Actually, stepping back, what is an LLM text file and what's your take on it?
Essentially, it's a standardized file that mirrors what a robots.txt file broadly did for traditional search engines for specifically LLMs. And it's been around for quite a while. I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head how long this like structure has existed for. When we audit a website, we put it in the experimental bucket just because there's no like long-term studies and no like actual information from the LLMs on how they use it really. So we never say this is the number one thing you should do. I think you may as well do it and maintain it because it's not that difficult to do and maintain because it might have an impact, right? And it might have an impact in the future as well. But there's so much conflicting information out there that I can't in good conscience say like this is the number one lever you should definitely implement.
I love it, because I was going to say I'm so bullish on LLM text files. I can't poke holes in anything that you said there. It's absolutely the case right now that it is, from all the data that we can see, LLMs are not looking at it yet. To me, the opportunity that sticks out, and you hit on a lot of these points. One, it's not very time intensive to put together this like single page text file that just has some basic info about your business, like basic info about what separates you from the competition, so on and so forth. Whatever you decide to incorporate in there, that's important. It doesn't take that long to do it. But the reason I see it as so beneficial is there are so many scenarios that I'll talk to a business when we're kicking off an engagement together, and I'll ask them, like, hey, what really differentiates you from the competition? And oftentimes, clients that I'll talk to have a really hard time putting that together in like succinct answer, or they'll have a really hard time openly stating, here's the things that we're weak at, here's the things that we're trying to improve, but here's what makes us way better than everyone else. To me, LLM text files are a positioning exercise. If you're forced
Yeah,
to sit down and put together like a publicly facing document that says, here's what we're good at, here's what we're not good at, here's the specific customer we're really well suited to help, it gives you a little bit of accountability and it forces you to really think about those things internally. But then, as you said, it's something, it could be a really big opportunity down the road. I'm convinced at some point in the near future, OpenAI or Anthropic are going to adopt LLM text files, and then there's going to be like a mad dash from everyone in the space to start creating them. So it doesn't take that long to build, and short term, if you do it, it's going to give you a huge advantage over your competition.
absolutely. I think that's the overarching theme of this entire exercise. Like you said, it's like there will be a mad dash once the shift happens. So do it now while you have the time and the patience to do it and you're not panicking. And then you're ahead of the competition once everyone kind of jumps on it and does like you said, the mad dash once the shift happens, right?
Absolutely. So I would say in the realm of LLMs, to me, like the one topic that I think still has, I would say the one like big hole I can poke in LLM optimization, let's broadly say at the moment, is rank tracking. In my experience, there isn't a great singular system to track progress in LLMs. I'm curious how you guys internally are like, I'm going to broadly say showing results in the LLM space, because I think that it's a big unknown right at the moment.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So, like you said, the leading brands out there that are traditionally usually more SEO focused, like ranking engines that will show you what you're ranking for and what your traffic is, they all have an AI visibility product now that is a lot of the time not very good. And the reason we say it's not very good is because the results differ across all of the different tools, right? So, there's like no single source of truth, and it's very hard to prove that that traffic is actually coming in. So, we take a more anecdotal approach to it, which I know is also not the most statistically tight, but it's the best thing that we have at the moment, where we'll just ask everyone involved in the project to grab as many devices as they can, install a VPN, go to different locations, and just try different queries that we're trying to rank for in the different LLMs, and then use that as anecdotal evidence. Because if we're across the country or across the world, we're all using different devices, all different VPNs, and we still rank at the top. That is the best indicator we have at the moment. I think while these tools catch up and become better at like giving you hard data on how you're ranking. And then a secondary metric obviously is sales. So all of the AI chatbots do a good job of UTM tagging their outbound links. So you will see in your Shopify analytics, you will see sales generated by ChatGPT or Claude, for example.
Absolutely. There was one theme I really wanted to ask you about, which is agentic commerce. Within agentic commerce, there are a lot of very jargony acronyms that are thrown around. Can
Yep.
we talk about agentic commerce at a very high level and what we mean by like ACP, UCP, MCP? I think it's a new space that has a lot of opportunity, but there's so much jargon in the space that I think it can be kind of alienating to maybe people who aren't working on the space every day.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that the first big distinction is between these protocols that you just mentioned and just agentic search visibility. I think it's important to understand that those are two different things. So when we talk about, or when these tech platforms talk about agentic commerce, essentially what they mean is they're all trying to do a land grab where they implement a protocol, which is then becomes the standard for you to submit product details to these LLMs, right? And they're thinking about them more as a sales channel. So OpenAI pulled back on this, but the original idea of OpenAI was they have a universal protocol with which you can submit product data to the platform, and then there will be a checkout that happens on the LLM, right? So they get the product data, they get all of the information like the pricing, and then it just runs through your payment gateway, but the whole front end interface is OpenAI. Whereas AI search visibility is more search engine optimization, right? How do I show up as a recommendation, but then the link goes out to my website and the commerce component still happens on my website. I think personally, I think the agentic commerce stuff is more of a dud, if in my personal opinion, just because all of these platforms are going to charge a surcharge for it, right? OpenAI was going to charge you 3% for doing that, and which company wants to dole out an extra 3% on top of their payment processing fees that they'd still be paying if they can just optimize for visibility and then get a link out to their website, right? And there's the consumer doesn't seem ready to type their payment information into an agentic commerce window and just buying without visiting the brand's website.
And I'm inclined to agree with you. We're just to timestamp this, we're at middle of April, let's say right now. I think it was, I want to say 2 weeks ago that Shopify announced that brands were automatically going to be enrolled in agentic commerce through, it started out with ChatGPT and then they added Microsoft Copilot, a week after that, let's say. I'm with you in that it seems like there are enough friction points that this is going to take a really long time to get any sort of market share. And when it does, it seems like it's going to be a small part of the market. But at least for the time being, if you're on Shopify for that fraction of a percent of sales that are coming from agentic commerce, Shopify is going to automatically enroll you in there. And again, timestamping this mid-April, seemingly there is no way to opt out of the OpenAI, the ChatGPT side of things, which I thought was interesting. Copilot, you can opt out of it for now. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. It's brand new technology to learn about, and yeah, we'll see if it gains any sort of traction.
I think the one thing to mention there is if you have a lot of extra time on your hands for some reason, or you're really engaged and bullish on agentic commerce, what Shopify does let you do is they let you determine which. So I think at the moment it's price, description, and product title. You can choose which field you use to sync to the protocols. So one thing you can do, and this is a very simple example, but by default, Shopify will push your Shopify product title as the product title that goes into these protocols. And similarly to Google, usually that won't include your brand name, right? Because on your website, you don't put your brand name in front of every product title. So a very simple fix is to use a meta field instead of the product title and go in and add your brand name in front of the product title, right? Like that's just a simple example of some mini optimization you can do. I can't really speak to the impact that's going to have. It's just like some basic stuff you can do if you have extra time on top of optimizing it, all of the other stuff we've just talked about.
Brilliant. So I can rename my razor blades to Pat's Shiny Razors whenever you see it pop
Exactly.
up in ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Oh man, James, this has been great. Before we wrap up, covered a lot of ground. For those listeners, let's say that are at $1 million in annual revenue, let's recap. What are maybe the 2 to 3 things that they should be doing? Like at this point, they should be, after we say our goodbyes, they should be pausing the podcast and sitting down and saying, okay, I'm going to take an hour and do these 3 things to really get my business ready for AI search.
Yeah, so again, like you said, validating from competitors, what are they doing? Just gaining some intel, I think, is a good start. Looking at schema.org, specific to your product categories, what schema can I implement? And then just go and do it. Like even as a first step, just on your best sellers, start implementing as much schema as you can, making sure your FAQs are machine readable, your policies are machine readable. I think that's the most important thing, just because that's going to have the most immediate impact. And then move to the more experimental stuff, right? So the LLMs.txt we mentioned, adding more schema markup about the company, like that kind of stuff.
Brilliant, brilliant. James, for listeners that want to follow you, want to just read more of your insights, what are the best places they should go to find you online?
So I post on LinkedIn every day, and most of the time it will be agentic commerce specific. I do post about more generic Shopify stuff as well, but I think LinkedIn is the number one place at the moment. And then we do have an automatic kind of audit tool that we use to go through the technical like setup of a website that gives you a basic score on how well you're doing in terms of being ready for AI search visibility, right? It won't give you like results like how you're ranking at the moment, but it will at least give you a this is how well your tech setup is primed to be ranking in AI queries.
Brilliant. And where can we find this AI tool? I believe it's on the homepage of your website, but what is your website? Where can we go to find this free audit tool?
Yeah, it's ai.kirkbyconsulting.com.
Brilliant, brilliant. Once again, listeners, this is James Kirkby, the founder over at Kirkby Consulting. James, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to Customer Growth Sessions. If you found it helpful, subscribe and give us a review. It helps us to grow the show. Looking for more SEO guidance on how to grow your business? Contact us at intergrowth.com/estimator or email me directly. You can reach me at pat@intergrowth.com. That's all for today. We'll see you again soon.